Welcome into the Steelers Talk Live Show. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. We are getting ready for Sunday Night Football coming up this weekend, and today we got some great Steelers content for you guys. Shout out to all the real ones that are here at the beginning of today's show. First up on the show, I'm going to be explaining why and how the Steelers aren't going, quote-unquote, all in on this season and why that's actually a good thing for the long-term future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then I'm going to be breaking down why this Steelers team could be a very dangerous team in the AFC come playoff time. Then we'll get to your questions. The Week 10 live mailbag will be coming up later in the show. So if you guys have a question that you want to get on the program today, simply use hashtag Steelers down there in the live chat. If you use hashtag Steelers and then get your question in after that, producer Ponzi is going to be able to see your question, and we'll get the best questions on the mailbag today. So if your question's good enough, you can get your question on the show for free today. And if you just want to make sure that your question gets on the show today, you guys can super chat any dollar amount, $2, $5, $10, $20, doesn't matter. If you guys want to get your question on the show today and on the mailbag, a super chat with a question attached to it is automatically slated to make the mailbag. So if you guys want to take your chances for free today, you can use hashtag Steelers, or if you want to guarantee a question to get on the mailbag this week, you guys can super chat any dollar amount. Now I want to see who the real ones are. Down there in the comment section, we already have almost 300 people in the chat, so spam those me's down there in the comment section if you are here at the beginning of the show and have already clicked that thumbs up icon. I want to get to at least 50 likes before we get into our first segment today. Shout out to Tristan, Trevor, Mr. Deadhead, Jack, Trent, Ken. We got Hot Rod 24. Czar Craig is here. We got Colt Dog, Dwayne. We got Black Wolf. We've got Fluffy. We've got Steelers Son, Barry S. We've got Joel. We've got Ryan. We've got Javon. We've got Joel. We've got Cassie. My lovely fiance's here, of course. She's going to be flying from Minnesota back here to Texas tonight. So big shout out to her. Hopefully she has a safe flight. Can't wait to see her later. We got Trent, we got Fluffy, we got Matthew, we got Eugene, we got Gen05, we got Matthew, we got Deshaun, we got George, we got Junior L. We've got a good crew of Steelers fans ready to talk some football here. We're already up to 75 likes, man. This show's already getting off to a great start. So if you guys have a Steelers topic that you guys want to discuss today and you want to get on the show and you want to get on the mailbag, feel free to send in your donations. If you guys don't know how to send in super chats, you guys can press that money symbol. It looks like that dollar bill down there in the live chat. Put in the dollar amount that you want along with your question. We'll make sure to get you up on screen. We already have a couple super chats that we'll get to here in just a second. But first, let's bring on our producer. Producer Ponzi is here. And Mr. Ponzi, of course, we were live for almost 5 hours during the NFL trade deadline on Tuesday, waiting for a potential move from the Steelers. Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reported today that the Steelers were actually working the phones to try and get a veteran defensive tackle to try and get a backup because Daniel Quale is out for the season. But they bring in a 320-plus pounder from the Kansas City Chiefs practice squad this week. He will be on the active roster this week, former third-round pick. So, obviously the Steelers don't get a wide receiver, but if you listen to Aaron Rodgers, you listen to Arthur Smith talk, like they feel very comfortable with the wide receiver room as currently constructed because they do use so many tight ends and because they do use their running backs as receiving weapons and they distribute, all these different targets to all these different players. And you know what I was thinking, Ponzi? I was going over the numbers actually about how much they distribute the ball to a bunch of different people in this offense. And there's just no way in hell George Pickens would be happy in this offense.
No, I don't think so either.
Like George Pickens is such a talented player, and I'm happy that he's found a system there in Dallas, which is kind of a pass-heavier system that gives him a lot of targets, and he seems happy there. I think that's a good fit for him. But can you imagine if George Pickens was in this system and he was getting 2 or 3 targets in a game? He would be throwing tantrums every single time on the sideline. And although I love George Pickens as a talent, I think something that's been a big boost to this locker room has been, the tight ends and the wide receivers, that don't get the ball. They don't complain about it. They are team first guys here in Pittsburgh. And I think that's one of the big benefits of the wide receiver room that we have here. What are your thoughts? Do you think the Steelers have enough in that department?
I mean, really going back to your point about, George Pickens to get to distribute the ball, DK Metcalf only had 2 catches for 6 yards. Mm-hmm. And he was fine with that. He knows his role in the offense. Obviously, you want your receivers to do more, but
especially the guys that are getting paid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to that point, I just don't think that and I think Aaron Rodgers said it best, is that some weeks I target some other guys and some weeks I do.
Yeah, he throws it to the open person.
So, I mean, it's not like the wide receiver room is not getting open. I just more think that Rodgers is having a certain set of a game plan against different teams, and he wants to exploit them. Sometimes he uses Darnell. Sometimes he uses Pat. Sometimes he targets Calvin, all these other guys. And I think that, as is, this offense is humming.
Yeah,
it's just, I worry about if injuries happen.
Yeah.
But,
if DK Metcalf goes down, you're in a pretty tough spot. But I think most teams, if their number one receiver goes down, they're in a bad spot. There's definitely less than 10 teams in the league where if you take away probably even less than 10, maybe down to 5 or 6 maybe, where you take away the number one receiver in their offense and they're fine. There's just not a whole lot of teams out there that you can lose their number one receiver and you're good about that. And really, guys, in terms of that argument where it's the Steelers are one injury away from catastrophe, most teams are one injury away from catastrophe, especially at the quarterback position, right? There's not a lot of teams that can lose their starting quarterback and feel good. And so but we don't say that about quarterback, but we're saying that about DK Metcalf and the receiver. So I think obviously, there's certain players on your team that you can't afford to get injured if you want to go on a run. DK Metcalf is one of those players for the Steelers. But Aaron Rodgers is another one of those players. That doesn't mean that we should go trade for Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins, in case, Aaron Rodgers goes down with an injury. It's just, there's always going to be players on your team where if they get injured, your season's pretty much done. Just so happens that, DK Metcalf is one of those players right now. And, let's face it, even if you got Jacoby Myers, even if you got Rashid Shaheed, even if you got Calvin Ridley and DK Metcalf went down, this wide receiver room would still probably be in a pretty tough spot moving forward. So
I agree.
And it would have been in a better spot, obviously, if you added another piece. And I probably would have paid up for Jacoby Myers. That's my personal opinion. I thought Omar Khan maybe lowballed the Raiders a little bit, and he ended up getting outbid. But at the same time, I think we can also say this season is not lost. This defense here in Pittsburgh played lights out against the best offense in football coming into the week last week. And I think they're going to have another great performance this week against the Los Angeles Chargers. So we got some super chats here that we got to catch up on before we get into our first segment. Shout out to Bernard, always putting in the questions. Says people says A-Rod has been playing lackluster.
People are going to say what they want to say.
People are going to say what they want to say. And, I'll say this about the offense, Ponzi. It's not an elite offense. It's a good offense, okay? And that's all we've really needed from this offense. As long as the defense plays the way that they play, and, if they can play great defense to elite defense, this team's going to be a really good football team with a good offense. And I
think, I don't think a lot of people were expecting Aaron Rodgers to be his MVP self, but he's been playing pretty good. And I'm really happy how he's been playing.
I think he's been great. I think he's been, out of all the options that the Steelers could have gone down at the quarterback position, he is by far the best one. Besides maybe Sam Darnold. Maybe Sam Darnold would be balling out if he signed with the Steelers. But, Aaron Rodgers, certainly a good pickup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's perfect for the culture. I think he's the leader that this locker room has been missing. And I think that, this offense is certainly good enough to get this team to where it needs to go if the defense can live up to its billing, which we'll see if they can down the stretch. $2 again for Bernard says, who's better, A-Rod or Marino? All time, it's A-Rod. He's got the championship. I think he's passed Marino in a lot of different categories. He's still behind him in a couple, but yeah. I think he's gonna pass Marino. I think he's passed him.
I think my personal take, maybe it's a little bit of a boomer take. I cannot deny in terms of impact, I gotta say it's Dan Marino, just because he had such of an impact with that 1984 season alone. It just changed how defenses handled the pass. Getting into that, but I think statistically it's got to be A-Rod, and I think Marino though does have the better legacy of all time in my opinion.
All right, that's fair enough. I would say A-Rod, you would say Marino. I guess it's all subjective at the end of the day. Let's keep these rolling on here with the super chats. Bernard again says the offense still put up 27 points. They be fine. I will say, though, a lot of that was supplemented by the turnovers that you got. Aaron Rodgers said it himself. We got to score 30, 40 points in that game, if you're going to have 6 turnovers and you're going to get the ball in Colts territory time and time and time again. So And also, remember, they got the ball like at the 11-yard line on a botched punt return on the Colts, and they didn't even score. So, like, you got to play better than 27 points if your defense is going to get 6 turnovers. But listen, I'm with you, Bernard. This offense has been pretty consistently getting into those at least mid-20s points ranges throughout the season. And, over the last several years here in Pittsburgh, that just hasn't been the case. Like, the Steelers have lost a majority of their games over the last several years where their defense gives up more than 20 points. This year, it's a different feel where the offense can certainly win a game where the defense scores or gives up more than 20. Again, Bernard says, I think MVS will ball out with A-Rod.
Certainly hope so.
Certainly hope so, man. And I do think that, you look at, MVS's speed, which he still has, his chemistry with Rodgers. We'll see how fast he can get on the active roster. It could be as early as this week if he learns the playbook quickly. But as we kind of saw with Mike Williams last year and, frankly, Roman Wilson last year, this is a tough playbook to master because they have multiple plays in the huddle. And you have to master the entire playbook to even kind of understand the language. So I'm sure Rodgers will be a very good translator for MVS, who's been in the league. He's, he can translate the Green Bay stuff and the language there to what Art's running here in Pittsburgh. So we'll see how fast he can get on the field. But, he still has his speed, and you better believe Rodgers, is going to have that trust in him to throw the ball deep when they do put him on those deep routes. So, I'm definitely intrigued to see what MVS can do for us this year. $2 from Anime Video says, which Steelers Super Bowl team was better, the 06 or the 09? I got to say 09, man. That defense was just unreal. I mean, as Mike Tomlin said, that defense was the reason why, the player safety initiative was created for the NFL. Those guys hit hard. Ryan Clark, Troy Polamalu, all these guys on that team were just absolute freaks. And, it's honestly one of the greatest defenses of all time, that 09 defense, in my opinion. So I got to go 09. Plus you had Ben, who was better at that point than 06, in my opinion. He was a fully established superstar quarterback at that point.
The 06 Super Bowl was legendary before getting the bus.
Yeah, 100%.
But
all of them are legendary. All of them are legendary, right?
Exactly.
They're Super Bowl championships. But, for me, especially with the final drive, getting the ball to San Antonio, in the corner.
A great Super Bowl, too.
Incredible Super Bowl, incredible throw from Ben in the clutch, great catch by San Antonio, and great defense. So I got to go with the 09 team, Anime. $2 from Bernard says, is there a problem with DK and A-Rod? No, there's no problem. Here's the thing with DK, okay? He's a true number one receiver. And what did Mike Tomlin say when we acquired him? Okay, he demands that the defense shifts their coverage in his direction because of his skill set. With his size and speed and yak ability, defenses have to respect that. So they're going to shift coverage away from the rest of the team and the rest of the weapons, and they're going to go to DK Metcalf. Now, obviously, that means that somebody else is going to have to step up in order for the offense to have success, and we've seen guys do that. Pat Fryermuth's had big games. Calvin Austin's had big games. Roman Wilson has looked good at times, right? Darnell Washington gets open quite a bit. They'll dump it.
Been good.
Rodgers will dump it off to Jaylen Warren because he always makes the first guy miss, right? So Jonnu Smith, they've got a lot of different guys to kind of spread it around with. So if they're going to double cover DK and there's another open receiver, it's a smart move for A-Rod to throw it to that other receiver. And then the second that they, put one-on-one coverage with DK, the second that they don't rotate coverage to him, DK's getting the football. So I think that's the right way to look at it there. And I think Rodgers has done a good job managing that throughout this season. $2 from Darian says, so who did we get? So this year we got Kyle Duggar in a trade a couple weeks ago. Actually last week, I should say. He ended up playing great, and I think that is a huge X factor for this season because he's such a good run defender. And when you combine Kyle Duggar and Jalen Ramsey's ability to defend the run, we're going to talk about it in our second segment actually today, it has completely changed the way the Steelers defense plays defense, and it's been a huge game changer. And then you get Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who you don't trade for, but you do bring in free agency, so you don't have to give up a lot of draft picks. I mean, last year, you gave up a 5th and 7th round pick for Mike Williams and Preston Smith, who didn't do shit for you, okay? You gave up 2 chances at the dartboard on day 3, to draft players in exchange for players that didn't do anything for you in the short term. So this year, the Steelers didn't give up any draft picks, all right? They did trade for Kyle Duggar, but it was a late-round pick swap, okay? So they're not giving up any draft picks. They just downgraded one of them. And then you get MVS for free, and he's got established chemistry with Rodgers, and he's got really great speed, and he's still a deep threat. And listen, man, give me Kyle Duggar and MVS over, Mike Williams and Preston Smith, and I have to give up 2 draft picks to get those guys any day of the week. Okay, I would have liked to added another receiver. I would have liked to added, a Jacoby Myers or somebody like that, but obviously it just wasn't in the cards for the Steelers this year, and I'm actually okay with that. $2 from Bernard says, love A-Rod telling the truth. Unlike Russ, 100%. Russ, the thing about Russ that was so infuriating about him is that, when things are going well, his positivity is great. It's awesome. But then, when you're losing and things are clearly not going right and he's still saying, we're good. It's like, no, we're not. It's like we need somebody to get on these guys' asses a little bit and hold people accountable as the leader of this offense. And that's what A-Rod does. He's built up so much love and trust with the relationships that he's cultivated with these guys, where he's earned the respect of them enough to yell at them, okay? And, that sounds a little bit weird, but, if you really respect somebody, you don't want to let them down, and when you do, that guy yells at you, you never want to do that again, all right? And you want to make abundantly clear throughout the week that you do not let that guy down. So I actually like A-Rod's leadership style. I think it holds this offense accountable. And after last week's performance where they let A-Rod down a number of times, I'm sure this week they are laser focused in preparation for that Chargers defense on Sunday night. $2 from Darian says, did something new happen with the Steelers? Not really. I mean, you look at Asante Samuel Jr., he's going to be visiting on next Wednesday. So we'll see what happens with Asante Samuel Jr., whether or not he ends up signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's visiting Green Bay today. He visited the Panthers yesterday. He's got the Vikings tomorrow. He's got the Niners next Monday, the Bears next Tuesday, and then he's finishing his tour here in Pittsburgh. So we'll see if he signs. He's got a lot of suitors. He's a good player. So I'm sure there's a lot of teams out there that could use his services. So we'll see if they end up signing him. $2 from the Mikado says, if we get Asante Samuel, eat a cheese sandwich. I'll eat a cheese sandwich. All right, the Mikado. All right. Just send me and Ponzi the video of you eating the cheese sandwich. We'll put it up on screen for you.
I pray for you, brother.
Tanker365 with a 5 says, I am worried about the Chargers slot receivers. Keenan Allen has torched us in the past. How do you think schematically we can slow them down? Well, something that they did quite a bit last week, actually, Tanker, against Josh Downs, the slot receiver for the Colts, is they did a coverage called one double slot. What that is that it's essentially cover one, but instead of putting that extra defender in the middle of the field, they double team the slot. Okay, so they have one defender playing outside leverage, and then usually a linebacker, mostly Patrick Queen last week, playing inside leverage. So if Josh Downs decides to go out, the corner or the DB is going to be on him. If he goes inside, Patrick Queen's got him. And they did that quite a bit, and they kind of shut down Josh Downs. They did let him get one catch on that double team, though. Brandon Echols was out of position on a third down and long. He ended up picking up a first down, but that's certainly something that you can do. Keenan Allen is a great slot receiver. Lad McConkey is terrific from the slot as well. Rondé Gadsden, their stellar rookie tight end out of Syracuse, is also going to line up in the slot. So absolutely, Tanker, the Steelers got to have a plan to address that slot position, not give Justin Herbert any easy answers. And I think we might see more of that, double coverage slot receiver type of coverage that from the Steelers defense this week. $1 from Kevin Royce. We appreciate you, Kevin. And then he puts in a 5. Says, do you think we should line up MT, Washington, Mount Washington in the backfield in goal line situation? I mean, I'd be open to it. There's no reason that, I think. He's
already been involved in the tush push.
He's already involved in the tush push. That's a good point there, Ponzi. And obviously, even if he's not in the backfield, right, he is somebody that, is terrific as a blocker on those goal line sets. So he's a weapon in the red zone, man. He is, because you can line him up out wide, and he is just a 50-50 ball machine on the outside against these tiny DBs that try and cover him. But then, if you want to put him at running back and try to hand off a couple to him, I'm open to that idea as well. He's such a big human being with a lot of power. And, Ponzi, when he gets the ball and he's running after the catch, he's so hard to bring down. So I actually don't hate that idea, Kevin. It would certainly be interesting to see if they implement that. $5 from Richard Castillo says, I would have loved to have Jacoby Myers, but I think MVS will be a good fit. Yeah, that's kind of the way that I feel, Richard. Jacoby, would have brought something to this wide receiver room that they don't already have, which is a big body route runner with really excellent hands. They don't have one of those on the team right now. They do have a good route runner. Calvin is an excellent route runner. And he's got better hands than people give him credit for, but he's not big, right? He's not as big and tough as a guy like Jacoby Myers is. And to add Myers to that mix, and then teams would have to deal with DK's verticality and his speed and his size, but then they'd also have to deal with the route running and the hands of Jacoby Myers and Calvin Austin III, right? So that would be really difficult as a trio of receivers to guard for opposing defenses. Would have been nice to get him, but, it seemed like the price tag to get him was a 4th and a 5th round pick, 2 draft picks to get one player for like half a season before he becomes a free agent. Would I have done that? Yeah, maybe. I probably would have actually. I want to go try and win a Super Bowl this year. Plus, if you give up those 2 picks, you still have 10 picks in the draft next year. But at the end of the day, Omar Khan is an awesome drafter, and this scouting department has done a really good job since Omar Khan has taken over as this team's GM. I mean, literally, Ponzi, every single pick that Omar Khan over the last 3 years has taken in the first 4 rounds has a role on this Steelers team right now. Every single one. Every single one of them has a role on this team. And it's just
compared to some other teams?
Exactly. Like, that is a 100% hit rate on his players in the first 4 rounds of the draft, at least to this point. That is an incredible hit rate. I trust Omar Khan with those picks. I just do. $5 from Black Wolf says, you guys are cool as hell. I have deleted every other Steelers channel I had because on your channel, it's no whining, no bashing our coaches or players. Well, we just try to keep it real, man. Like, if things aren't going right, we're going to tell you what's wrong, but we're also not going to catastrophize and, just complain to complain, and we're not going to not acknowledge the positives, right? There's positives and negatives to everything, and I think it's important to break both of those elements down as much as you possibly can so that you guys can have all the nuanced information that you can so you can come to your own conclusion. So that's what we try to do here on Steelers Talk. I appreciate you, Black Wolf. Enzo with a 5 says, if we get Asante Samuel, who's getting bumped from the 53-man roster, and how do you think they scheme the defense with him being plugged in? Well, I'm not exactly sure who gets bumped off of the active roster, Enzo. It certainly would be somebody, maybe like Andrus Peat or, somebody that's usually inactive for the Steelers. But what I'll say here is that if they get Asante Samuel Jr., they got to guarantee him a starting spot because you better believe Chicago and the 49ers and Minnesota and Green Bay and Carolina, they all have guaranteed starting spots for him. So if the Steelers tell him, hey, you got to compete with Darius Slay, he's not going to take that, all right? Like, Darius Slay has to be the guy that they replace in this defense if they give Asante Samuel the job. And Asante, what he's been known for, specifically when he's played on the outside, is he's been more known as an off-zone corner, all right? He's not really like a press man guy because he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's pretty instinctive. He can play in the slot, but he can also play outside as an off-cover corner. So the Steelers would have to play that style of defense, and that's exactly the style that they mostly played versus the Indianapolis Colts. And, that also happens to be the best system for Darius Slay. So if you're getting Asante Samuel, you're pretty much just saying he's better at that job than Darius Slay, which I think would be the correct thing to say. But he certainly would be an upgrade, in my opinion, in the cornerback room. $5 from Junior L. Says, imagine how many passing yards and touchdowns Rodgers would have without the drops. Imagine his pass percentage without the throwaways. He's been great. Yeah, I think Rodgers has been everything that we could have possibly asked for from him at this stage in his career. I said from the very beginning, I'm not expecting Aaron Rodgers to save this team. I am not expecting him to win league MVP. I'm not expecting him to carry us to a Super Bowl. All right, what I wanted from Rodgers is somebody that can, throw the football effectively and efficiently, throw it accurately, find the right receiver, go through his progressions, not take too many sacks, get the ball out fast, and manage the game well. And I think that's exactly what he's done, and he's done a little bit more than that. He's made some truly incredible throws this year, man. His mobility, I think, is better than I expected it would be this year. Obviously the defense still needs to carry their end of the bargain here if this team is going to make us run for the Super Bowl. And it seems like they might be turning a corner here, but Rodgers has certainly been holding up his end of the deal as well. $2 from the Mikado says Myers is only a half-year rental, not worth a 4th and a 6th. I might, I don't necessarily, think that's a bad take. I understand the take for sure. I might disagree with that maybe slightly, like just because, I really think this team has a shot to really do something really special this year, and adding a guy like Myers that the Steelers don't have in their wide receiver room would have been really nice because it would have allowed you to do different types of concepts that would have worked better than with the current personnel, that sort of stuff. And obviously, time is limited with Aaron Rodgers here in Pittsburgh. Plus, if you give up those 2 picks, you still have 10 picks next year, which is a lot of picks. That's 10 rookies you're adding to your roster just next season. So for me, that would have been worth it. But, I understand your reasoning there, Mikado, and we're going to talk about that here in our first segment coming up. $5 from Louie. Man, we got so many questions today already. He says, ownership blocked Khan from giving up any draft capital to Tomlin for this team. I base this on Rooney's interview from 2 weeks ago. Thoughts? I mean, anything is possible. But I honestly think that, one of the things I really like from Art Rooney as an owner is he doesn't meddle with the football people. He understands that he's not the smartest guy in the room when it comes to football stuff. That's what he hires Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin to do. And he, for the most part, gets out of the way. So I really don't think Art was putting himself into, the fray here. I could be wrong on that. Maybe he did say, I want 12 draft picks next year because the draft is in Pittsburgh and that's important to me. Maybe that was the case. But, Louis, I think that, just watching Art Rooney and his movements all throughout the years, that's usually not his style. So I think that probably didn't happen. But, anything's possible because, I don't know for sure. So we're going to get into our first segment here coming up. If you guys want to join us for Sunday's watch party, of course, this is going to be a big one. We're going to see if the Steelers defense can replicate that dominant performance they had against the Chargers offense versus Justin Herbert and the Chargers offense this Sunday night. And we're going to have over an hour of pregame coverage for you guys, getting you ready for that Sunday Night Football matchup, followed by live play-by-play and analysis of the game itself, followed by extensive postgame coverage. So if you guys want the full game day experience, the most extensive game day experience anywhere on YouTube for Steelers fans on game day, you can go click that subscribe button and join us on Sunday night. All right, man, let's get into our first segment here, guys. And the first one on today's show is why the Steelers aren't going all in, and why that's okay with me. Steelers fans, the Pittsburgh Steelers this year are not and have not been going quote-unquote all in this season. That's been a popular narrative because of some of the moves that they have made during the offseason, that they're going all in for a championship this year. But I think I just categorically disagree with this kind of designation that people have put around the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. And today on Steelers Talk, I'm going to be breaking down what their actual team-building philosophy is, why it's different than a quote-unquote all-in mindset, and why it's better long-term for the Pittsburgh Steelers to go on the track that they've already put themselves down heading into the 2026 offseason and beyond. Now, before we get into the content today, make sure you get down there in the comment section and kick us off here by letting me know, should the Pittsburgh Steelers have gone quote-unquote all in this year? Type yes or no down there in the comment section to let me know your thoughts. Now, the first thing that I want to kind of point out here, guys, and this is really going to set the foundation for my argument on today's show, is that there's a difference between a win-now mindset and an all-in mindset. Okay, now I think that this is kind of like a square and rectangle sort of situation where every all-in team is trying to win now, but not all teams that are trying to win now are necessarily all-in, if that makes any sense. And when I think of all-in type of mentalities, I think of the Los Angeles Rams back in 2021, right, where they trade multiple first-round picks and their starting quarterback for a guy in Matthew Stafford to help them win now. They trade more draft picks to go get guys like Odell Beckham Jr. and Von Miller and load up all the talent that they put on that roster, backload contracts so that they could get as many high-end talents on that roster for that season as possible to try and get themselves one ring with Matthew Stafford as their starting quarterback and to get Aaron Donald his lone championship. And, I think the signs of an all-in team are, A, you're trading a ton of high draft picks in exchange for short-term roster solutions, okay? And, certainly you see that with teams trading day one and day two draft assets for high-end players at the trade deadline or during the offseason, like the Rams did in this case, getting Matthew Stafford, and then also backloading contracts to collect more high-end veteran talent. This is what the Rams did by backloading the contracts of guys like Stafford, like Aaron Donald, like others on the roster to get more players. OBJ, Von Miller, throughout the season, they were able to put together a team, to their credit, that for that one season was able to go on a run and win the championship, okay? So you might be saying at home, well, if the Rams did it, why shouldn't the Steelers do that strategy? It worked for them. Why can't the Steelers do that? Well, the answer to that question is, first of all, it's very short-lived. The Los Angeles Rams completely went downhill the next year. They completely missed the playoffs the following year, and they had to kind of sell away a lot of their players, and they had to start over, and now they've drafted really well, and they have a really great young defense, and Stafford is still there, and he's playing well and all that stuff, but they've had to completely rebuild since that 2021 season, and frankly, they've gotten lucky that they've drafted as well as they have. If they hadn't, they'd probably be in a pretty bad spot right now because they mortgaged so much of their future to get that one championship. And, the truth is, guys, the Steelers have never really taken that approach ever to team building, where we're going to trade away a ton of our high draft picks. We're going to backload contracts. We're going to do all this different stuff in order to win one championship in one season. Okay, they've always been a team that has tried to have a more sustainable approach to team building, where they try to win now without trying to mortgage the future. So coming up here, I'm going to explain exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers' team building philosophy is and why it's better than, say, going all in on just this one season here in Pittsburgh. But before we get into the rest of today's show, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the hard-hitting football action is even better this football season with our friends at Prize Picks. The weather might be changing outside, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the bigger payouts and you really know ball, go for the power play, where you got to get everything right. But if you get everything right, you get even higher payouts. No matter what you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app. You guys can see here my Prize Picks lineup for Sunday Night Football between the Steelers and Chargers. I'm taking the more on passing yards for Aaron Rodgers, the more on rushing yards for Jaylen Warren, the less on passing yards for Justin Herbert. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on the Prize Picks app today. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So Pittsburgh's team building philosophy, and this has been the case even going back to the Kevin Colbert days and frankly, during the entire Super Bowl era, which is to try and find a balance between looking to win in the present while also not mortgaging the future in order to do so. And in fact, Omar Khan, I think, has taken this philosophy on steroids, especially this past season, by loading up on comp picks during the 2025 offseason. Right now they're sitting with 12 draft picks right now. So they certainly have the foundation to build for the future, but they've also made a lot of big-time win-now kind of moves that indicate that, yes, they are trying to win a Super Bowl this year in the short term, okay? They brought in Aaron Rodgers, a 41-year-old quarterback on a 1-year contract. That is a short-term solution at the quarterback position, and they brought him in because they believe that he can deliver a Super Bowl in the 1 or maybe 2 years he spends as the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They also traded a second-round pick in this year's NFL draft to make sure they got their #1 receiver of the future in DK Metcalf. He is here for the next half-decade, so that's kind of a win-now move, but also a move for the future. They brought in a 34-year-old corner in Darius Slay in the final year of his career. Now, that signing certainly hasn't panned out as much as some of the other moves, but it was still a win-now move they made this offseason. Then they traded for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, 2 veteran players that they believe can help them out on both sides of the ball, and they have certainly made some contributions, especially Ramsey on the defensive side of the ball. And then they extended a 30-plus-year-old TJ Watt to a record contract for an edge rusher. You don't do that if you're rebuilding, okay? Plain and simply. And, the results of, the moves and the win now moves that they have made this offseason is that they've got the first top 15 offense that they have had in a very long time. They're consistently scoring over, league average point averages, scoring 27 and 30-plus points pretty regularly at this point. Also, the defense seems to have turned a corner versus the Indianapolis Colts. They started going to Kyle Duggar and Jalen Ramsey as some really big, great run-defending safeties in the middle of the field, playing more too-high coverage, blitzing less, and now all of a sudden this defense looks like what it was billed as heading into the season, and hopefully that continues. And then also they have a ton of playoff veteran talent, and believe it or not, guys, that is super, super important to having success in the NFL playoffs. All right, if you don't have players with a lot of playoff experience, some guys, first time with the playoff limelight, they can shrink. That's not going to happen with guys like Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Rodgers and all these guys that have won Super Bowls that they have brought in. So certainly this is a team capable, if they can put it all together, to compete for a Super Bowl championship this year. However, none of those big moves that they made this offseason jeopardized or threatened the future of this football team, and frankly has kind of allowed this team to accumulate even more draft capital, to get even more draft picks, and to inject this team with even more young talent in the years to come. I mean, you take a look at some of the things that they did this offseason to keep their eye on the future. I mean, they let multiple free agents walk in free agency. Najee Harris, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, all these guys leave in free agency so that they could get more comp picks, which is why they have the 12 total picks that they have right now. Their entire free agency strategy revolved around stacking comp picks. They wouldn't sign players if it affected their comp pick formula. All right, they made trades like for DK Metcalf, Jalen Ramsey, and Jonnu Smith. Doesn't affect the comp pick strategy. You get a guy in Aaron Rodgers who was released by the Jets. Doesn't affect his comp picks. Doesn't affect the comp pick formula, right? So they were very conscious of the moves that they made, not affecting the comp picks that they would get in the 2026 NFL draft. And then they traded a super talented wide receiver in George Pickens for an extra third rounder. And then also they refused to include 2026 draft picks in the Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith trade. So obviously draft picks in the 2026 NFL draft and building for the future here in Pittsburgh is still very much at the forefront, even though they are still making moves to hopefully put this team in title contention here in 2025. And, frankly, this kind of strategy that the Steelers have done where they're, both trying to win now and they're preparing for the future and they're consistently rotating in young talent with veteran talent has allowed this team to be the most stable organization in football in the Super Bowl era. Okay, you take a look at all these accolades that the Steelers organization has since the Super Bowl era began. They only have 3 head coaches since 1969, and all 3 of those gentlemen will be entering Canton into the National Football League Hall of Fame, into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and 2 of them are already there in Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher, and like it or not, Mike Tomlin is likely on his way there as well. They're also tied for the most Super Bowl championships with 6. They're second in Super Bowl appearances with 8. They're second in total wins from a franchise, and they're also second in franchise win percentage, and they are just behind the Dallas Cowboys, and they are likely to probably pass them in the years to come. They've been catching up in many of the previous seasons, and, they also have 21 straight non-losing seasons. That is tied for the NFL record with the Dallas Cowboys. And if they get more than 8 wins this year, if they get to 9-8 this season, it certainly seems like this team is capable of doing that. They will break the all-time NFL record for consecutive non-losing seasons, most of those under head coach Mike Tomlin. So this team with this philosophy has been super, super stable. Obviously, they've won a lot. And, when this team is rebuilding, they're going 9-8. They're going 10-7, right? We're not like the Browns where when we're rebuilding and we're trying to build for the future, we're not winning 3, 4, 5 games and our fan base is completely miserable. All right? When we're high, we're high. We're winning championships. We're doing a great job. But even in our low times, what makes this organization so great is that even when we don't have good quarterback play, even when we don't have good offensive coordinator play calling, stuff like that, this team still finds a way to get to 9 and 10 wins, and for this team to be somewhat entertaining to watch throughout the course of that rebuild. And with 12 draft picks next year, Pittsburgh, didn't need to mortgage the future to go get another wide receiver at the NFL trade deadline this year. Now, personally, I probably would have offered more than Omar Khan did for Jakobi Meyers, especially because, listen, man, the Steelers don't have a big body route runner with excellent hands the way that Jakobi Meyers does. I think Calvin Austin III is a good route runner, and he's got better hands than people give him credit for, but, he can't run block the same way Jakobi can, and he can't be as physical in his routes as Jakobi Meyers can. So the skill set that Jakobi could have brought to the table would have been a completely unique skill set that would have added something to the Steelers' wide receiver room. I completely agree with that take, all right? And I probably would have given up maybe a 4th and a 5th round pick to be able to go get Jakobi Meyers. But the Steelers didn't do that. And, the people that are crying about that on Steelers Twitter, they have every right to do so. But let's not pretend that this season is completely lost, all right? This offense, even without Jakobi Meyers, is an above league average offense, and it's only getting better as the season goes on. And then when you combine that with a defense that looks like it has the potential to be a top 5 unit down the stretch, this team really has a chance to be pretty darn dangerous come playoff time, even without Jakobi Meyers on the roster. Also, with those picks that we kept, we also know that Omar Khan is going to use those picks well. He has been one of the better drafting GMs in the National Football League, especially when it comes to early round selections in the entire league since he took over as the GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's just take a look at the picks that he has made with the guys that he has selected in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft in the first 3 years that he has been selecting for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, you got Broderick Jones. He's your starting left tackle. Joey Porter Jr., one of your starting outside corners. Keanu Benson, one of your starting defensive linemen. Darnell Washington has a very prominent role in the Steelers offense. Nick Herbig, maybe the best rotational edge rusher in football. Troy Fautano looks like a future all-pro right tackle. Zach Frazier might be a future all-pro center. Roman Wilson, he's your starting number 3 receiver right now. Peyton Wilson might be a future all-pro linebacker. He looks incredible. Mason McCormick has looked terrific this year at right guard. And then this year, you get Derek Harmon, who has looked awesome in his first year in black and gold. Caleb Johnson, we'll see. And then you got Jack Sawyer, again, we'll see. But both of those guys certainly have promise as well. So Omar Khan has done an excellent job where literally every single player that I just mentioned has a role on this football team. Even Caleb Johnson got some carries last week and had some snaps. All right, so every single player on this team that Omar Khan has drafted in the first 4 rounds over the last several years has a role with this team. Now, will all those players pan out? We'll have to see, but the fact that he's had this good of a hit rate and none of those players have completely flamed out yet is pretty darn impressive, and because of that, at the end of the day, I trust Omar Khan as the Steelers GM. Would I have personally given up a 4th and a 5th for Jakobi Meyers? Yeah, I probably would. I would have liked to added his skill set to the Steelers receiver room, 100%. But it's also true that this offense doesn't use a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and that probably isn't going to change down the stretch. It's also true that those 2 draft picks give you a couple more dart throws for the con artists to go get you some more young talent. So I think that this Steelers team, without Jakobi Meyers, is still a potentially dangerous team in this league, especially come playoff time. And at the end of the day, man, I trust Omar Khan to do his job and do it at a high level. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Do you trust Omar Khan as the Steelers GM? Type T if you trust him, or type D if you don't. For me, I still have a high level of trust in the con artist. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. If you guys like contextual, nuanced, in-depth Steelers videos like this every single day, that's what we try to provide for you guys here on Steelers Talk. And it seems like a lot of people think that that's what we provide because we're the only individually run Steelers news channel with over 100,000 subscribers. So if you guys want to join that over 100K Yinzers that have already clicked that subscribe button, do that for me right now. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. First segment in the books, Mr. Ponzi. We're going to get into our second segment here, a lickety split. So make sure you guys get your questions in. Hashtag Steelers, or probably at this point, guys, you got to put in super chats to get on the mailbag. I think that's just the way it's going to go today. But $2 from Bernard says, do y'all think Aaron Rodgers is lackluster like people said? No, I think he's awesome. I think he's great. $5 from Grant says, is catastrophize a word? That's that. He says, because I said catastrophize. I actually don't think it's a word, but it sounds like it describes what they do. right? They like to. It's like what Mark Madden and all these guys are just like, oh, everything is terrible, and there's nothing good, and all this shit. And it's like we have the most stable organization in all of professional football in a league designed for parity. And like all these people do is cry and moan and whine. And it's like, how about we look for some solutions instead of just crying about problems? I don't know.
It's easier to complain for them.
Exactly. Also, negative press sells more than positive press. He says, going to throw that in the vocabulary soon. If so, you can throw it in anyway, man. We're making up our own words here. He says, a real note. Worried about run game without Seumalo. Thoughts? It sounds like the injury to Seumalo is not super serious. He might even play this week, so we'll see what ends up happening. But, yeah, man, if he's not playing, I do have some concerns about Jaylen Warren in the run game because before they went to the jumbo personnel packages, the run game wasn't really good at all those first 3 weeks. So to take Seumalo out and to put Spencer Anderson in at left guard – and they don't run jumbo personnel looks, that would be a step back for the run game, in my opinion. $5 from Czar Craig says, with how this draft is looking, if you were in charge, would you still go QB in round 1, or would you beg Aaron Rodgers to stay and wait until 2027 to draft a QB? It still depends, Craig, because you could still flame out this season and have a pretty decent draft pick next year, and then you could potentially trade up for a QB. We'll see which quarterbacks come out next year and how many first-round caliber guys are coming out. I still think about 4 guys will go in the first round. I think Ty Simpson, Dante Moore, Fernando Mendoza, they'll all come out. They will all go first round. And then if I had to guess right now, I think Lenoris Sellers comes out, and I think he'd be the fourth guy off the board. And for me, the Steelers are certainly a team that would love to get a Lenoris Sellers, especially if they're bringing back Aaron Rodgers for another season. And, I've been on record saying I think what needs to happen for Rodgers to come back is they need to, have a good record this year, at least above 500. I think they got to make the playoffs. I think Rodgers needs to play well throughout the entire season, or at least well enough, and they can't win the Super Bowl. All right, I think if they win the Super Bowl, he'll ride off into the sunset, probably with Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward may just retire next year if they win the Super Bowl, along with Aaron Rodgers. And if they miss the playoffs entirely, I think Rodgers probably retires then too. But if you make the playoffs and you don't win the Super Bowl, I think Rodgers would say, hey, we were pretty close this year. Cam Hayward's got one more year left. I mean, honestly, I think Cam would be the guy making the call. He'd be like, Aaron, please come back for one more year. If they draft a rookie and they start him, I mean, there's never been a rookie starting quarterback ever to win a Super Bowl, ever. So obviously the chances of Cam winning a Super Bowl and retiring a champion go down to pretty much zero if they start a rookie quarterback next year. So, all right, if I had to guess right now, I think it's actually more likely than not Aaron Rodgers plays for the Steelers next year. Now, there's certain things that can happen. Win the Super Bowl this year, miss the playoffs. Rodgers gets an ACL tear or something like that, a serious injury that, he's just going to want to retire afterwards. All those things are possible, but I think right now the most likely scenario is Rodgers makes it to the end of the season, somewhat healthy, and they go to the playoffs, but they lose eventually somewhere down the road, and he comes back for 2026. $2 from Bernard says, whose do you dislike more, Florio or Skip? Skip. Easy Skip. I don't like Florio either. They're both fucking clowns, but Skip is just he just infuriates me, man. I don't even know how to describe it. Junior L says, with the age average of our team being 28, comfortable that we did not give up draft picks. We have enough vets now to be competitive. With the picks we have, our team will be younger and skilled. Yeah, man, and like I said, I trust Omar Khan with those draft picks. So, I don't blame him for holding high value on those draft picks because this team in this front office has been so good picking these players, especially in early rounds. And they've got 7 picks within the first 4 rounds next year, currently slated. So I trust him with those picks, plain and simple. $2 from Robert Locke says, rest in peace, Marshawn Leland. Much love to his family. I mean, that what went down happened 30 minutes away from our studio. And, of course, our thoughts and prayers go to Marshawn and his friends, family, the Cowboys organization. I'm sure that they're just reeling today. that's just a terrible situation. If you're seeking, listen, man, if you're going through something emotionally, please seek help. Please seek help, because that situation is just heartbreaking. $5 from Tink McGathy. $5 again says, did we pick up Broderick Martin from Kansas City practice squad? Read that today. Thoughts? Yes, we did. We brought him in, and obviously because we're poaching him from their practice squad, we had to put him on our active roster. According to Jerry Dulac, the Steelers were looking for veteran defensive tackle depth in a trade before the trade deadline, and they weren't able to find something suitable, so they decided to go with Broderick Martin. Instead, he's a former third-round pick. He's got some talent. He's over 320 pounds, and he's going to be asked to play, I think, pretty quickly. So he's another big body, that they're going to be rotating in. He's a depth piece, but, certainly somebody that can help this team out. $2 from Shannon Cassidy says, Asante visiting us last gives positive vibes. I mean, some people are saying it's bad because he's going to sign with a different team before he even gets here. And then some people look at it as, hey, he's saving the best for last. He wants to sign here. All that different stuff. You can look at it however you want to look at it. All I know is the Steelers have to guarantee him a starting spot if they're going to sign him, because if they don't and they force him to, quote-unquote, compete for the job with Darius Slay, he's going to go somewhere else, because Carolina would guarantee him a starting spot. Chicago would guarantee him a starting spot. Green Bay would guarantee him a starting spot. So, if the Steelers are not going to be that aggressive and say, you will start for us week 1, if you sign with us, he's not going to be coming here. So I don't know what the approach is going to be for the Steelers, but there are certain things that are connecting Asante to Pittsburgh, right? The Steelers team doctor did his spinal fusion, so obviously he's got that connection. Also, his dad has been super complimentary of the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. He actually liked a post today. Somebody said on Twitter, hey, Asante Samuel Sr., would you be happy if your son played for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And he liked the post. So obviously, Sr. would love to see Junior play in the black and gold. But we're just going to have to see what happens, man. I think he'd be an instant upgrade over Darius Slay. But certainly, there's a lot of competition out there, and the Steelers are going to have to be aggressive if they want to land him. All right, let's get into our next segment here. Of course, we'll get to everybody's super chats by the end of the show. So if you've super chatted and we haven't gotten to you yet, we will get to you eventually. Excuse me. And let's get into our second segment here, guys. And we just talked about why the Steelers aren't going all in and why that's a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially long term. Now let's talk about why the Pittsburgh Steelers are a very dangerous team in the AFC heading into the rest of this season. Steelers fans, I believe this year's Pittsburgh Steelers team could be a very dangerous team come playoff time and down the stretch of this 2025 campaign. And even though they haven't exactly looked the part of a Super Bowl contender so far in the season, I certainly think that they have what it takes to potentially get there, and I think that they've found the winning formula on both sides of the football that could get the most out of this year's roster. Now, before we get into the content today, make sure you click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. If you believe in this year's Steelers team like I do, I believe in the talent that they have accumulated here in Pittsburgh for the 2025 season, and I believe they're starting to figure out how to play with these guys together. Schematically, but also the chemistry starting to come together. I really think this team can be dangerous down the stretch. If you with me on that, click that thumbs up icon. So let me start with this. Like I said, in my intro, Pittsburgh has largely not played like a title contender for probably the entire season, maybe outside of the Colts game, all right? And even in the Colts game, the offense didn't play great. You take a look at both sides of the field. We'll start with the offense here. It's an above league average offense, I would say. They're doing a really good job protecting the football. They're doing a good job in the red zone. And because of those things, and they're kind of about league average and kind of everything else, that all accumulates in an above league average scoring offense with 25.3 points per game, which currently ranks 13th in the National Football League. So this offense is the best it's been in years, but even then, it's just been a good offense. It hasn't been a great offense. It's not like just completely lighting it up where they're putting up like 30-plus points a game and, they're an elite offense. That's just not what this team is. I think that they've played very efficient football at times. I think they've done a really good job protecting the football and scoring when they get into the red zone. Those things have been huge for the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense this year. But, we'd be kidding ourselves if we said that this offense was playing at like a truly elite level at this point. And then on defense, it's been extremely disappointing. They've done a pretty darn good job in the red zone, and they've taken the ball away pretty darn well. They're second in the league in takeaways, but 11 of those takeaways came in 2 ball games, all right? So they've certainly been feast or famine in that regard. And then in terms of the efficiency, I mean, there's no way to slice it, man. They've been a bottom half of the league defense for pretty much this entire season. And this includes that excellent performance they just had versus the Indianapolis Colts, and they're still not even ranking in the top 20 in many of these key areas, which obviously is extremely disappointing given the fact that this team was billed as probably the best defense in football heading into the year. And I think that, the defense has generally been pretty dependent on turnovers to this point in the year, and that's kind of like the main criticism that people make when it comes to this defense. So it begs the question, all right, Jack, well, if those things are wrong with the Pittsburgh Steelers, why do you think that they could be dangerous down the stretch? Well, coming up here, I'm going to explain exactly why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be an absolute force in the AFC once we get to playoff time. But before we get into the rest of today's show, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the hard-hitting football action this football season is even better with our friends at Prize Picks, which is a free app you can download on your phone today. The weather might be changing outside, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is super simple to play, guys. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app. You guys can take a look here at my Prize Picks lineup for Sunday Night Football between the Steelers and Chargers. I'm taking the more on passing yards for Aaron Rodgers, the more on Jalen Moore and rushing yards. I think he has a bounce-back week this week after kind of an off week last week versus Indy. And I'm going to take the less on passing yards for Justin Herbert going up against the Steelers defense. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on the Prize Picks app today. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So the reason why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers can be dangerous come playoff time and down the stretch of the 2025 NFL season, and why I think this team can absolutely win the AFC North Championship this year is I think that they found their winning formula, not only on the offensive side of the ball, but also on the defensive side of the ball now. And I think that this Steelers team has a chance to be one of the more balanced football teams in the entire league as we approach January when the games really matter. Now, let's take it one at a time here, and let's start with the offense here. And I think that the winning formula on offense, and we've known this really since Week 4 when this team beat the Minnesota Vikings in Dublin, is that it's a ground and pound run game with jumbo personnel packages to kind of get the ball rolling, forcing teams into heavier personnel, into single high safety coverages, and then paired with a smart and efficient passing game with Aaron Rodgers leading the way under center. And frankly, guys, ever since the Pittsburgh Steelers went to their quote-unquote jumbo personnel packages back in Week 4 in Dublin, everything really changed. Before that, the run game was one of the worst in the league. The passing game really couldn't get anything going outside of short passes because, teams were just sitting in 2 high safety shells and they couldn't get those teams out of those 2 high safety shells. And, it just wasn't a very good product on offense through the first 3 weeks. And then after that, they've done a really good job. They've been a top 5 rushing game in the league since then. They've throwing the ball down the field more often because there's more single high coverages, opening up more space for guys down the field. And just generally, this offense has been better, in the second quarter of the season than they were maybe in that first quarter, those first 3 weeks. But the truth of the matter is, guys, Pittsburgh cannot win a title this year without a great defense. Like we talked about earlier, this offense is certainly good enough. It's the best that it's been in a very long time, and I think Rodgers, with his experience, can captain the ship there. But, this team's not going to win a Super Bowl because of their offense, all right? I think we all understood going into this season, if the Steelers are going to win a Super Bowl this year, it's going to be because they've got got a good to really good offense, but they have a great to an elite defense that's leading the way and causing havoc on that side of the ball. And the good news is I think Pittsburgh may have figured out their winning formula on that side of the football with some very key changes that they made last week versus the Indianapolis Colts that I think are sustainable and are going to allow this defense to play really good football as we head down the stretch of this 2025 season. And that winning formula on that side of the ball is to play with a two high safety structure kind of base defense with Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar at safety, then also rely on 4-man pass rushes, not blitzes, to get home and create havoc for opposing quarterbacks while keeping the maximal amount of defenders out in coverage to force quarterbacks to hold the ball for longer. And before, what they would do is they'd play a lot of single high coverage, they'd play a lot of man, they'd play a lot of blitzes, and I think that the Steelers' plan heading into the year, and the reason why they got guys like Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay was these guys, along with Joey Porter Jr., are going to be able to lock down anybody we play in man coverage, and they kind of like overestimated what Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey still are as athletes at this point in their careers, because once upon a time ago, that plan might have worked. They were some of the best man corners in the league, but those guys are just not those guys anymore, and I think they had to come to that realization, and in Week 9, everything changed. They traded for Kyle Duggar to create kind of this tandem at safety with Jalen Ramsey where you got two big safeties playing in two high safety pre-snap alignments. They blitzed less versus the Colts than they did at any point during this season. They played a lot more man-match coverage as opposed to pure man, and they put more double teams on slot receivers to prevent them and prevent quarterbacks from just getting the ball out to the flat or get the ball out on a quick slant to that slot receiver. Now, the big benefit of playing and basing out of two high safeties and why you should do it if you can get away with it is because it keeps what you're running post-snap in terms of pass coverage pretty ambiguous to the opposing quarterback, and they have to process the defense post-snap to determine what it is. Because if you have those two high safeties up there, it could be a lot of different things. It could be quarters. It could be quarter, half. It could be Tampa 2. You could rotate a safety down and play cover 3. You could rotate a safety down and play true man coverage. Like, there's a lot of different things you can run out of a two high safety shell, and it's a lot easier on the defense because if you try and do these rotations from a single high alignment, it makes it a lot more difficult, and frankly, you put a lot of players out of position to make plays if you do it that way. So I think that what the Steelers did was they kind of figured out that if they play two high safeties, they're going to be able to stop the passing game a lot better. The downside usually to playing two high safeties, and this has been true forever, is that it leaves you more vulnerable to the run game because you got one less player in the box, so the offense has the numbers advantage in the box to be able to run the football. And, despite having that numbers advantage, the Pittsburgh Steelers were still able to shut down Jonathan Taylor in this ballgame, all right? Jonathan Taylor only had 45 yards on 14 carries, averaged just over 3 yards a carry, obviously had no touchdowns. So what did the Steelers do to be able to survive in these two high safety coverages pre-snap, but also shut down maybe the best running back in football currently running? Well, the answer to that question is they involved Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar, their deep safeties, quote unquote, in the run fit. And they use these guys as almost like pseudo linebackers where they're big, they have long arms, they are relatively athletic, and they can take on blocks, they can do all the things that linebackers typically do, and they're also really, really solid tacklers. So you get these two run defending safeties in there that are also very, solid in coverage, and you can kind of, survive in these two high safety shells, but also stymie one of the best running backs in the National Football League today. So that was the big change and really the genius move that Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, and Omar Khan kind of conjured up last week that I think is probably going to completely change the Pittsburgh Steelers season because before, let's face it, guys, Chuck Clark and Juan Thornhill were very big liabilities at safety. And it kind of harkens back to the season when they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick. The safety play that year before they got Minkah was terrible, and the defense, frankly, was one of the worst in the game to that point. And then you simply inject Minkah Fitzpatrick into the lineup, and all of a sudden the defense just starts flying, and they're one of the best defenses for the rest of the season. I think we're looking at something pretty similar here with injecting Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar as big run-defending safeties in a two-high safety system. And I think that, the Steelers defense has found their winning formula in that regard. And really how it all came together is that, you put Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar at safety. You play those two high safety structures, which kind of camouflages what Pittsburgh's doing post-snap to the quarterbacks, which forces the quarterback to hold the ball for longer. And because they're holding the ball for longer, it allows Pittsburgh's pass rush more time to get after that quarterback, because before, quarterbacks were just getting it out super fast, in the flat and in the slant, and, they would be able to make a guy miss and take it for lots of yards after the catch. That wasn't the case this week, man. And, the pass rush was as good as we have seen it over the last several seasons. And I got to tell you, man, if this defense is going to, live up to its billing and be, one of the best defenses in football down the stretch, the pass rush, which carries a lot of money, man. TJ Watt over $40 million per season. Alex Highsmith with a hefty contract. Cam Hayward also with a hefty contract. With all the money and really the talent and the resources that have been put into this pass rush, it has to be the reason why this defense is elite. And frankly, the reason why you give this pass rush so much money is because, it allows you to have enough talent to give you the advantage of only being able to rush 4. All right, what do bad teams with bad pass rushes do? They blitz a lot, and they try to get creative with the way that they send blitzes because they don't have enough talent to win the one-on-one matchups to win with just 4 rushers. But how did the Philadelphia Eagles shut down Kansas City and the Chiefs last year in the Super Bowl? They got home with just 4, and they played coverage on the back end. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers need to do, and that's what they did versus the Indianapolis Colts, and they shut down the best offense in the National Football League with that plan. And listen, man, with the chaos that the pass rush creates, that leads to turnover production. As we talked about earlier, when this team is playing at its best, when it's creating a lot of turnovers, the 2 best wins that this team has this year against New England on the road and against Indianapolis at home, they created 11 total turnovers in those 2 games, all right? So, with that chaos, it forces quarterbacks to make decisions faster, which forces mistakes, which forces strip sacks, all that stuff. And, if that's here to stay, then I think we're looking at one of the best defenses in the National Football League. And frankly, if this defense does play this way and you combine that with an offense that has been very, very competent, let's call it, this year, it hasn't been elite, but it's been very competent. You're looking at a team here with an elite defense that can beat anybody and an offense that can get after anybody as well and put up points and capitalize when defenses get these big turnovers as well. So I think the key to the 7th Lombardi Trophy, the record 7th Lombardi Trophy, if they're going to do it this year, is this defense plays the way it did versus the Indianapolis Colts. So let me know down there in the comments section, do you believe, is there a non-0% chance that the Steelers win the Super Bowl this year? Okay, type yes if you think they have any chance to win the Super Bowl this year. Type no if you think the Steelers' season is already over and there's no chance of them hoisting a 7th Lombardi Trophy. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. Thank you guys so much for stopping by here this afternoon. I'll see you guys later. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. Got some more Super Chats here before we get into the mailbag. And he says, Rodgers has 5 years left, same as Brady had. I don't know if he has 5 years left. I would be happy if we got 2 more years out of him. I mean 1 more after this year, so 2 years total. What I want is for him to do his very best to get us a Super Bowl this year, and if he can't do it, come back next year and mentor the future franchise quarterback. And whether that's Will Howard, which I don't think it is, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, or if it's like an early round draft pick that you try and develop behind Rodgers, that's what I want to happen, okay? I think that's the best way forward because not only does that give you the best chance to win now, but I think it's the best chance to tutor up and kind of build up a future franchise quarterback. So whoever that ends up being, I'm completely supportive of it. But, yeah, I would love Rodgers to come back for at least 1 more season, JV. $5 from Mexamander says what the Steelers need to be in Super Bowl contention is another wide receiver, and for the defense, especially the cornerbacks, to step up. Yeah, man, defense stepped up last week. They did. And, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was 42% of the Colts' total yardage in the game on Sunday came in garbage time. So, when people throw out the number of, the Colts had, 300 and whatever yards against the Steelers, the defense was still terrible. It's no, most of that yardage came in garbage time in the 4th quarter when the game was already locked up and they were just playing, off coverage because, they were trading time off the clock for points, essentially, is what the Steelers were doing. So I think they only gave up like 3.9 yards per play before garbage time. That is an elite number. That would be number one in the National Football League by, I think, a full half yard if that was for the entire season. And you did that against the best offense in the game to this point in the season. So I actually think the secondary did step up a bit last week. Now, they certainly gave up some plays, especially on 3rd and long, and especially when they did play man coverage, like pure man coverage. Once again, some of those issues reared their ugly head. Darius Slay had some poor reps. Brandon Echols had some poor reps. Of course, Joey Porter Jr. Will get flagged from time to time, but for the most part, I think the secondary had by far their best game of the season against the Colts last week. And you say we need another receiver. I mean, maybe you're right, but I kind of disagree with the idea that the thing that's keeping the Steelers from winning a Super Bowl is like a Jacoby Myers who has no touchdown receptions this year. You know what I'm saying? Like Deebo Samuel has more yards than Jacoby Myers has this year. And it's not like the Commanders are like this wagon of a team this year. They're bad. So I don't know, man, if I agree with that, Mexamander, but I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate you sharing your perspective. Let's get into the mailbag here, guys. We got a shit ton of questions that we got to get to on this mailbag. You guys have been so generous with your time here today, guys. Still over 350 people watching. So without further ado, let's get into the Week 10 mailbag coming at you right now. It's my favorite segment of the week. It is the Steelers Talk Mailbag here in Week 10 as the Pittsburgh Steelers prepare to take on the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday Night Football in the City of Angels this weekend. And I got your questions here today, guys. We got a lot of questions with Super Chats, so thank you guys so much for all of your donations and all that great stuff. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already before we get into the questions. Because if you guys want to join the most interactive Steelers community here on YouTube, we have over 100,000 subscribers that bleed black and gold. We have weekly mailbags like this one. We have weekly live shows every Tuesday and Thursday. We go live for every single Steelers game where you guys can come hang out with us and talk ball. And we do community posts every single day on this channel, 2 videos a day talking Steelers. So if you guys want to join the most interactive Steelers YouTube channel anywhere here on YouTube for Steelers fans that bleed black and gold, make sure you click that subscribe button right now. All right, so we got Tink McGathy with a 5. Says, did we pick up Broderick Martin from Kansas City practice squad? Read that today. Yes, we did. According to Jerry Dulac, this week, the Steelers were trying to pick up a veteran defensive tackle via a trade before the trade deadline after the injury to Daniel Ekuale, who is a big-time rotational run defender for the Steelers this year, out for the season with a torn ACL. So that sucks, and obviously the Steelers have been looking for a replacement. Martin is a former third-round pick, a lot of talent there, over 320 pounds. He's obviously on the active roster now because they poached him from the practice squad in Kansas City. So certainly excited to see what he can do with that size and kind of talent profile. $2 from Anime Video says, which Steelers Super Bowl team was better, 06 or 09? Certainly 09, in my opinion. 06 obviously was kind of like the underdog team, which was a really special run, obviously, with the bus, riding off into the sunset and all that stuff. But the 09 team, man, first of all, an incredible game. James Harrison, returning that 99-yard, pick six. Big Ben's clutch drive, Santonio's catch. That defense was legendary. As Mike Tomlin likes to say, that defense was responsible for the player safety initiative in the National Football League because they hit so damn hard. I got to say, man, the 09 team has a special place in my heart. $2 from Bernard says, who's better, Aaron Rodgers or Dan Marino? I'll give it to A-Rod. I know, some of the older people will say Marino changed the game and all that stuff, but I'll also say Rodgers changed the game quite a bit with his out-of-structure playmaking. You listen to a lot of the quarterbacks in the league that are kind of coming up, like they grew up watching Aaron Rodgers and they're inspired by Aaron Rodgers, just like A-Rod was probably inspired by Dan Marino, right? So, obviously it's a cycle with these guys, the mentors of each other and all that stuff, and you're passing down what you know. And that's why Rodgers says he wants to play here in Pittsburgh. He wanted to come back is because he wants to share his knowledge of the game and pass it down to the next generation, which I think is a pretty cool thing. But for me, Bernard, I'm going with Aaron Rodgers. He's a top 5 QB of all time, in my opinion. Richard Castillo says, I would have loved to have Jacoby Myers, but I think MVS will be a good fit. And this is kind of exactly how I feel about the situation, guys. I would have really liked to get Jacoby Myers, and personally, if I were in charge of the Steelers, I maybe would have given up a 4th and a 5th-round pick even maybe to get a guy like Jacoby Myers. And I know he would have been a 1-year rental, but that doesn't mean you couldn't have signed him to another contract, right, guys? You got Jacoby, who's got this really great complementary skill set, or it would have been really complementary with what the Steelers already have, because they got 2 true deep threats in DK and Calvin. And if you're trying to play more 3 wide receiver sets, getting a guy that's a big body, tough, physical route runner like Jacoby Myers, who has excellent hands, would be the perfect piece to add to this room. But obviously the price tag was a little bit too high for Omar Khan, and frankly, I really trust Omar Khan with those draft picks. He has done a phenomenal job drafting as the GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do in years to come. So scale it for me down there in the comment section. What is your confidence level in Omar Khan as the Steelers GM? Scale is 0 to 100, 0 meaning no confidence at all. He sucks, to 100 meaning I have absolute confidence in the con artist. This will be the pinned comment on today's show, so in just a second here, I'm going to let you guys know about an awesome opportunity to get a great piece of Steelers memorabilia. And while I talk about that, you guys can go down there and give me a number between 0 and 100. And now you guys have an opportunity here to get a 2025 Pittsburgh Steeler roster signature football here when you use our link, chatsports.com/signature. Now, I want to make abundantly clear, these are not real signatures, all right? They're laser engraved on the football. But, what's great about that is you still get the signatures, but it drives down the price quite a bit. So you can get every single signature on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster for the 2025 season and take home a piece of Steelers football history, at least for this season, for $50 is the price tag right now when you go chatsports.com/signature. So if you want something really cool for your Steelers man cave, if you want something that's a great gift for your husband, or your wife that loves Steelers football, whatever the case may be, go chatsports.com/signature. That link is down in the comments and description of today's show. It's a really, really cool piece, and I think a pretty reasonable price for something that would be really cool to display wherever you want to display it. So again, chatsports.com/signature is the link. We get part of the proceeds for every purchase as well, so you're helping out the channel. So if you're interested in this, again, go chatsports.com/signature and make it yours today. $5 from Kevin Royce, who says, do you think we should line up Mount Washington in the backfield on goal line situations? It's a fun idea, Kevin. It really is. Washington is a big body, and, some of the things that I've noticed about him when he gets the football and he's running after the catch, it's really hard to bring down. I mean, he usually moves the pile forward. So if you need just 1 yard, Washington might be a good guy to be able to do that. But also, I really like the way that they use him on the tush push. I mean, he's just so goddamn strong pushing Connor Hayward forward, or maybe that's the thing that they should be doing, right? So very interesting idea there, Kevin. I like it quite a bit. $5 from Enzo. It says, if we get Asante Samuel Jr., who is getting bumped from the 53-man roster, and how do you think they scheme the defense with him being plugged in? I think the defense schematically doesn't change all that much, Enzo, especially if they're going to run a similar system to what they ran against the Colts. They played a lot more zone and a lot more man match than they did true man coverage against the Colts compared to their other football games this year. And frankly, Darius Slay is a better fit for, the man match zone heavy system that the Steelers ran, which is why I think he played his best game of the season against the Colts. It wasn't perfect, and I certainly think Asante Samuel Jr. would be an upgrade. But honestly, Samuel, kind of fits in the same kind of system that Darius Slay does, only he's a better player and younger and could be a longer-term option. So certainly would take Asante Samuel Jr. over Darius Slay if the opportunity presents itself. But I guess we'll see what team he ends up deciding to go to in the weeks to come. $5 from Tanker says, I am worried about the Chargers slot receivers. Keenan Allen has torched us in the past. How do you think schematically we can slow them down? Well, they did something last week, Tanker, where they played a coverage called one double slot, which is pretty much cover one man, but they double the slot receiver. And last week, that slot receiver is Josh Downs, who's one of the best route-running slot receivers in the game. So what they would do is they'd put a DB, usually their nickel corner, Brandon Echols, in outside leverage to take away the flat and to take away the out routes, that sort of stuff. But they would put Patrick Queen, the extra defender, on inside leverage on him. So if he broke inside on a slant, Patrick would be right there to take it away. That's certainly something that they can deploy yet again. They played that coverage multiple times against the Colts this past weekend, and it worked most of the time. So obviously the Chargers have a lot of slot weapons. Like Ladd McConkey, their excellent receiver, plays in the slot too. Keenan obviously takes time in the slot as well. And then Oronde Gadsden, their excellent rookie tight end, plays a lot as a slot receiver. So certainly different body types and different types of guys you're going to have to guard. It has to be a big part of the game plan defensively for the Steelers this week. Now make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. We still got more questions to get to here on the Steelers Talk Mailbag. But if you want to support the channel today, the real ones know, clicking that thumbs up icon is the easiest way to help us out. It tells the YouTube algorithm that Steelers fans are enjoying this content, that they should push this video out to more Steelers fans like yourselves, which gets new eyeballs on the channel, which leads to more subscribers, which leads to more likes, and so on and so on and so on. So we greatly appreciate your guys' support. Help out the channel today by liking the video. $5 from Grant says, is catastrophize a word? Going to throw that in the vocabulary soon? If so, in a real note, worried about the run game with Sayamalo. Thoughts? So in terms of the run game there, I am also a little bit worried if Sayamalo has to be out for any extended period of time. Now, it sounds like his injury with the pec is not super serious, and he's kind of week to week, day to day at this point. So we'll see if he plays against the Chargers. I'm sure by the time this video comes out, we'll have an answer on that. Maybe not. We'll see. But, if he can't play, that's going to be something that concerns me, because before they went to the jumbo personnel packages in the first 3 weeks, this run game was one of the worst in the game. So you take away the jumbo personnel packages and the effectiveness of those jumbo personnel looks, I don't know if this run game is going to be able to be what it can be, when he's out of the lineup. So hopefully he can play. $5 from Czar Craig says, with how this draft is looking, if you were in charge, would you still go QB in round 1, or would you beg Aaron Rodgers to stay and wait until 2027 to draft the QB? Obviously, it all depends on what opportunities are there and how many quarterbacks come out that are round 1 eligible and all that different stuff, Craig. But, generally speaking, what I would like to have happen is Aaron Rodgers comes back for another season, and you draft a quarterback that you really believe in the first round. Or maybe that's a trade-up situation. Maybe someone falls to you. I think that's the best setup because, I think if the Steelers believed in Will Howard more, they wouldn't have waited to the 6th round to draft him. Obviously, there's Will Howard. There's a reason why he went in round 6. He's not a perfect, round 1 caliber prospect or anything like that. If you have an opportunity to get somebody that you think can be a superstar that can compete with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson in this division, not to mention Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Drake May in the conference for years to come, I would go and get that guy and have them sit a year behind Aaron Rodgers to learn the system, to develop, and you can compete for a Super Bowl another year and then hand the keys off to a young quarterback that has already spent a full year in the league learning from one of the best in the game. I think that's the best way to transition from a win now kind of, short-term kind of solution with Aaron Rodgers to a long-term solution with hopefully your next franchise quarterback that can turn into a star player like Big Ben was and get this team into Super Bowl contention for many years to come. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Do you want Aaron Rodgers as the Steelers QB1 in 2026? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comments section. I certainly do at this point. We'll see if anything changes, like if he gets a big major injury or something like that. Knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen. But, at this point, with the way he's playing, I would certainly want Aaron Rodgers back in 2026. That'll be it for this week's mailbag, guys. Thank you so much for all of your questions. I greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. All right. So we'll take any more questions that come in, but we'll kind of briefly touch on this week's matchup here, Ponzi, where we're taking on the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. On this week's preview, I predicted 27-17 Steelers. I think the defense shows up again. I think they give up less than 20 points for this game, and I think they'll be flying around. I think Herbert will make some plays like he always does, but I think their run game isn't going to be able to do much. I think the pass rush will get after Herbert. He'll make some mistakes.
No Joe Alt.
I think the pass rush will be getting after him all day long, and I think that the Steelers offense will make enough plays to win this ball game.
And the Chargers have lost to some pretty bad teams, Giants and the Commanders. I mean, granted, that Commanders team was semi-healthy with Jaden Daniels, but still, they were pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I don't know if I'm going to call the Chargers frauds. I think they're pretty good when healthy, but that's
they're not healthy. That's the thing.
And they're not going to get healthy.
And they're not going to get healthy. Najee Harris, out for the season. Rashawn Slater, out for the season. Joe Alt, out for the season. Like, they're not a healthy football team. So, like, even though they're 6-3, by the way, Ponzi, the banner says Colts, not the Chargers.
Oh, oops.
And we're not at home. F Ponzi in the chat for not for not updating.
My bad. Sperry led me astray.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
Did I mess up on this?
You're throwing me under the bus here, buddy.
Did I mess up on this one?
F Sperry in the chat.
I did mess up on. Okay, I scripted it wrong, guys. That's on me. But yes, we will be playing the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday. I think the Steelers are going to win. I think they're going to make a statement in front of a national audience. And I honestly don't think the Chargers. I think I'm putting the Chargers in the fraud category right now. Along with like the Bears of teams that I just don't think are very good, frankly.
Maybe.
Yeah, Panthers are just meh. I don't know if anyone's really expecting them to do anything though. But I think when a lot of people talk about the Chargers, they think that they're like a good football team, but they've been kind of a disaster when they haven't had Joe Alt, which they won't be for the rest of the season. So like
they went out and traded for Trevor Penning, terrible. Trevor Penning's awful.
Now listen, man, like. They just have to go 4-4 the rest of the way. If they can go 4-4 the rest of the way, they'll be sitting at 10-7. And if they're sitting at 10-7, there's a chance they could make the playoffs. They've had a very good start to the year in terms of wins and losses. Started off the year with 3 straight wins, looking great with Joe Alt in there. And then once he went down, they lost to some bad teams, and now they've beaten a couple of bad teams by very low margins. And their schedule gets tougher down the stretch. So they got to find a way to get 4 more wins to get them into the playoffs. But I don't think one of those 4 wins comes on Sunday. I think the Steelers improved to 6-3 with a win this week. Then we take a look at Thursday Night Football tonight, and it's a divisional matchup. And as we know, and we have personal experience with this, Ponzi,
it's cursed.
It gets
cursed.
It gets weird. All right, on Thursday night it gets weird, especially with divisional opponents. Raiders, Broncos. On paper, the Broncos should run away with this game. I mean, this is the best defense in the game to this point in the Broncos defense, going up against one of the worst offenses that turns the ball over like crazy. They can't protect Geno Smith. They just got rid of Jacoby Myers, so they're less talented at receiver now. Like everything that, that informs you about who should win football games tells you the Broncos should win. But we've said that a number of times, especially with the divisional matchups on Thursday night, and shit gets weird in these kinds of matchups. So I'm gonna say this right now. Bo Nix stinks it up. Geno Smith has his best game of the season, and the Raiders win tonight.
You know what? I was thinking the same thing. I'm thinking, this is my only reasoning. I do not like Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is a bad quarterback, objectively. I just do not like him. I think, Bo Tebow is what I call him, because he's just, statistically, he's like the most terrible quarterback through 3 quarters. And the 4th quarter, he just goes out and balls out. I will say this. I think that Bo Nix can be a fine starting capable quarterback, but this season, Broncos fans have been going like, Bo Nix is the best quarterback in the AFC West. And I'm like, no. What are you even talking about?
He's not even second.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things where it's like,
I just have this vendetta against him because, Broncos fans are just all on the Hopi.
And I think that, national audience, Geno Smith may actually finally make me believe in him again. I might get some copium.
I'll know about that, but I know Thursday nights get weird. So you know what? I'm gonna go against my better impulses here, and I'm gonna go Geno Smith and the Raiders to win tonight against the Broncos.
Before the season, I was in love with Geno Smith. I thought he was gonna tear it up, but he's just been really bad. But he looked pretty good with Brock Bowers back.
Yeah, so. Brock Bowers was awesome last week. I think he has a big game in this one. All right, we'll take some final questions here before we head out. Bernard with a 2 says, do y'all think A-Rod...
well, it's the same one, but he did it again.
I mean, we answered it. No, I think he's great, Bernard. I think he's great. Another one says, A-Rod got 17 touchdowns in 8 games, more than any QB since Ben. Yep. I said, this offseason, you go get Aaron Rodgers, he'll be the best quarterback we've had since Big Ben Roethlisberger, period. And that's exactly what he's been. And we're only halfway through the season. He already has more touchdowns than Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. Any of these guys had an entire season.
Kenny Two Gloves.
Yeah, Kenny Two Gloves. And by the way, will we see Kenny Two Gloves tonight?
Kenny Two Gloves leads the Raiders to an upset win.
I mean, Geno Smith has been so bad this year that Raiders fans are seriously saying, like, oh, we got to start Pickett. And I'm like, you don't want that.
Well, we hear it all the time.
Is this another one?
Yep.
He says, do you think Ben took a shot at Aaron Rodgers? No.
What was the quote again? It was a weird quote.
No, Ben was saying, I think it's more of a shot on the Steelers than A-Rod, because he was saying, oh, they got Aaron DK Metcalf, but they couldn't get me a center that played center before, because Kendrick Green was a guard and they made him a center for his final season there.
Yeah,
so,
I think
I think that's more of a shot on the Steelers organization. That's probably just him saying, I wish.
Some sour grapes.
No. I don't even think it's sour grapes. Maybe towards the organization, where it's like, I wish in my final season they would have given me a little bit more help. But that's not a shot at Aaron Rodgers. It's not. All right, man. Well, that was the final question. So I want to thank each and every one of you guys for stopping by here today. We'll see you guys on Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, for our live coverage of Sunday Night Football. Steelers versus Chargers. Hopefully, Steelers can improve to 6-3, which would really put them in position to go on a playoff push here. And hopefully the Ravens can lose this week to the Vikings. How great would that be, Ponzi? Minnesota, I guess, is no pushover. They beat the Lions last week on the road. I don't know about that, but I do think Flores is going to be getting after Lamar Jackson this week. So keep your eye on that game. Okay, so that'll be it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys on Sunday. And until then, here we go, Steelers.